Oh, welcome back to Future You after that deep dive with Cal Newport. And better than asking ChatGPT about all these things, dare I say, Jeff was asking Cal for his perspective on all these things. I really appreciated what I would call Cal's essentially a third way through all these questions. You know, he helps us understand both sides of sometimes what is a polarized conversation about the current and future impact of AI. And then Jeff, in my view, he really helps give what feels to me like a dose of reality that sits somewhere in between or sometimes orthogonal to those extremes of the conversation, if you will. But at the same time, I felt like his admonition that we've all developed a bit of he called it a memory hole of what the early internet was actually like is a really important point for us to keep in mind. And to help us sort of like refresh our collective memories, I thought I might ask you to wind back the clock to your days as a cub reporter, if you will, fresh out of college in the mid-90s at the Arizona Republic. Would you mind going there, Jeff, for our viewers and listeners?
Yeah. So as Cal was talking, it just brought me back to that moment, right? So it was the summer after I graduated in 1995. I showed up at the Arizona Republic for a 10-week fellowship. I was assigned to the business desk, and the first day I show up and the business editor takes one look at me and says, "Well, you're young. You must know something about technology. Our tech reporter is on the leave for the summers, right? So you're now our tech reporter." Now, I must admit, Michael, I was a little disappointed because I wanted to be on the city desk or covering politics. But if you were to read the history of 1995 and its role in technology, I think it might be one of the most pivotal years because it really is the summer that was after the birth of the commercial internet and when it really started to become popular. And I remember being in Phoenix that summer and recall driving around the Phoenix area, and everywhere you went, you saw billboards. You would see the letters www on the bottom of anyone advertising a business. And so I remember, one of the first pieces I wrote that summer was an entire piece on what the letters www mean. Now, and just to prove this to our viewers who are watching us on YouTube, right? Like seriously, like, could you imagine a headline now that says, "Clients swarm World Web. Millions sign up for addresses on homepage concept." Right? It's like, it is like really looking through the history books. I'm not going to read the lead, but when we put up this podcast, we'll definitely be able to link to that piece. But just kind of a fascinating time. I wrote pieces on internet cafes that summer. Those are places where you could, you go get coffee and actually get on the internet, not like today where you would bring your own laptop or phone. Southwest Airlines, which was the first airline on the internet. Now, you could look up flights, but you still had to call the 1-800 number to actually book the flight. I wrote about chat rooms on AOL, which were kind of the precursor to today's Reddit. And also in that summer of 95 was Windows 95, right? And the hype around its new interface that really set up the modern desktop and eventually, of course, set up Microsoft's own web browser. Because remember, Apple at this time was in the midst of its real dark days at that time. But as I listened to Cal talk about the transition from the internet to eventually Google as a useful tool to actually use the internet, I thought back to those early days because the quotes from my stories back then, they're just kind of crazy now as I go back and read them. And here's one from that story I just showed you. It came from Peter Kriveritz, who, by the way, went on to become CEO of Kramer Kraswalt, which is one of the largest digital marketing firms in the U.S. Well, he told me, get this, in July 1995, that, quote, "The internet will stay around, but whether it will become a significant commercial force is questionable. I don't picture the web replacing television or newspaper advertising in the next decade." Now, he might not have been off. I guess
he was right about the time
decade.
frame.
Yeah. Maybe 2005. Right? He did say the next decade to give him a little slack there. But it really just goes to show you, I think, that none of us are great in the prediction game this early in a technology shift. But it also shows you that it just takes time to find that product market fit, as Cal said, right? So let's go back to the internet again, right? I think of my own journey through college. Freshman year, my work study job was as a computer consultant, so basically a glorified help desk in a writing computer lab on campus, those massive rooms of desktop computers. So that's like 91, 92. And then sophomore year, 92, 93, I get my first email address. So that's the product, right? Email. And then junior year, AOL really takes off. And I start reading the news on my first laptop. And then in 1994, Mark Andreessen starts, Netscape and releases Netscape Navigator. And then we finally have this commercial web that takes off that I write about in 1995. So, that period between, say, 1993 and 1995, it wasn't a trivial period. It was a real critical cycle in trying to figure this thing out called the internet and actually how to use it. And it seems like the same thing is happening now, as Cal said, how to actually best integrate this thing called AI into people's lives. Now, will that cycle be 2 or 3 years like it was in the 1990s for the internet? I kind of doubt it, because the clock speed of tech development is just so much faster now. And as we know, there's so much massive money in the market behind this technology, but there will be a cycle that we're in now. We're in that cycle.
Yeah, I think that's right, Jeff. I mean, just as you know, I was in London over the summer for 10 days on vacation, and I was walking around trying to figure out where the old internet cafes were, where I used to get online, because we didn't have it in the dorms when I was studying abroad at the time. And I think this was the year 2000. So to your, 93, 95 consequential time, we still didn't have Google at the end of that. And we still weren't wired everywhere by 2000, right? Like, this was still a process. And I think this memory hole point is just so important, because we can easily forget these transitions. I was listening to a book recently, actually, about how disruptive innovations are just different now from the way they used to be. They're just amazing from the get-go, is the author's argument. And it's not actually true when I reflect upon it. Like, it's still the case that most true disruptive innovations, they start as pretty primitive, Jeff, and then they improve, of course, from there. But they're kind of seeking their use case. They don't come out of the bat, fully baked in many cases. The internet and the businesses it spawned, clearly no different. Uber, frankly, no different. Like, you can go down the list. They all take some time. Online learning and higher education, certainly no different, right? We're still not there, I would argue. And ChatGPT is no different as well, I think.
Yeah, right. So, Michael, I recently talked with the faculty and staff at Seneca Polytechnic in Toronto to kick off the academic year. And during the Q&A, a faculty member in the fine arts asked me if writing, and particularly finding your voice, is a basic skill, or one in that in this new learning economy with the advances of AI will essentially go away. And so I wanted to just share this clip from my answer to that faculty member. I actually think that writing in your authentic voice is the kind of the superpower of this new economy, rather than just writing itself. I mean, I will admit, I use AI in my own writing, in my own editing, right? Like, if I'm stuck on something, I'll put in a bunch of prompts to try to say, how should I finish this paragraph? How should I finish this sentence? And then, by the way, it prompts me to think about something that I could put in my own voice, right? It actually helps accelerate my own writing and my own learning process. That is a higher level of thinking that we need to instill in our students. This is where I think AI can help us kind of with that foundational and that basic skill. And then we, as professors and faculty members and teaching writing, can help people advance their skills beyond that, so that they can learn how to write in their own voice.